All right, so today I'm going to go live to talk about how to stop tracking calories and macros. So first, I want to start by saying when tracking can potentially be helpful for you. So as a dietitian, I believe, even as a dietitian, I believe that there can be a time and a place for some tracking. Okay, when it can be helpful is that maybe something's a little off, right? Maybe that you struggled with disordered eating patterns currently or in the past. You stopped getting a period or have irregular periods. You are lower on energy. You are training for a marathon. Any of these instances can be times where we need to really reflect on what our nutrition looks like. And tracking can be a helpful thing, and I'll talk about when it can be helpful or how we can do it so that it's helpful. Tracking can be a helpful thing at these times. What you would do is, if you were looking to do this and investigate into kind of what you're taking in on a daily basis, is you'd use a reliable source to calculate your nutrition needs, right? See where you're at, how many calories you need per day, and then you're going to go onto a reliable tracking app, not getting the calories that you need from the tracking app, getting it from a separate reliable source, and you're going to punch in, okay, Tuesday I ate this, Wednesday I ate this. What is it looking like from what I am doing in comparison to where I need to be? That is when tracking can be somewhat helpful. Short periods of time, a few days, we as humans tend to eat pretty similarly from a day-to-day basis. Don't get me wrong, we're not always going to eat the same things. That's normal. That's what we want to do. But at the same time, overall, we tend to eat, I think the statistic is we tend to eat like all the same, like 20 to 30 foods, like the majority of the time. So you don't need to be tracking every day for it to be helpful. Just quick snapshot into what you're doing, 2 weekdays, 1 weekend day, to compare it to where you need to be, how many carbs you need to be taking in, how many calories you need to be taking in. And again, not using the source of the fitness or the tracking app, using another separate reliable source to get what your carb intake should look like, what your calorie intake should look like. That is when tracking can be somewhat helpful for you, okay? So when can it not be helpful? A lot of what I see is people who are religiously tracking. They feel like they can't go a day without tracking. They feel like they need to track more days than they're not tracking. Otherwise, they feel that they're going to lose control, that they have no idea what they're doing. They feel like there's a lot of anxiety around food if they're not tracking. This is not helpful to you. It's not helpful to your diet. Your goal is to really learn how to fuel your body without having to carry around your phone or without having to really think too much about it. And so when we're constantly kind of attached to something that's teaching us how to eat and in a very specific way, it can become super, super toxic, not just to our daily lives, but also to our relationship with food. So again, if we become reliant on doing it, if we're doing it almost daily, and then also if we're getting anxiety because we're doing it, for instance, like when I see those macros go over what they should be, or those calories go over what they should be, so I'm getting anxious, or I'm getting anxious or stressed when I'm not doing it. So maybe my friend has a bachelorette party or something, and I'm like, screw the tracking app for the weekend, I want to have fun. But then while I'm there, it's not that simple, and I start getting like, I really feel like I should be tracking all this. I really feel like I need to have it in my app. That's when it's not helpful. That's when we know we need to take a step back. We need to learn how to fuel our body without a tracking app and get as far away from it as we possibly can. Okay, so next I'm going to talk about the 3 ways, or my 3 biggest recommendations on how to stop tracking macros and calories. So the first one is just being aware of the current plan that you're following in the tracking app and if it's actually working for you. So I mentioned a few signs that you could, that your nutrition could be off in the beginning of the call. This can be irregular or missing periods, low energy levels, constant gas and bloating, feeling like you're constantly kind of over snacking, or maybe not constantly, but you're at risk, easily at risk for over snacking, mindless snacking, or binging. These can all be signs that your nutrition is not where it needs to be, and we need to reevaluate it. So if you're using the tracking app and noticing any of these signs and symptoms that I listed, we know that that tracking app is not actually working for you. And so it's probably also going to feel like you're a little bit more dependent on that tracking app, because you're going to feel like you can't trust your body without that app. And so once we become aware of if that actual plan in the tracking app is working for us or not, we can start to reassess what that plan should be. So if we kind of see signs that it's not working for us, a couple of things that you can do is start by increasing that calorie goal, or maybe that carbohydrate goal by, like 10, 20% each week, until we get closer to something that's more comfortable for our body and that our body's not showing negative signs or symptoms around, hopefully that makes sense. So again, assessing and being aware if that plan's actually working for you, and then adjusting that plan even prior to giving up on tracking, so that you're better meeting your nutritional needs, and you're going to be able to trust your body a little bit better when you stop tracking. So the next one is to decrease the days, all right? If you're someone who typically tracks 5 to 7 days per week, you want to start getting away from tracking, it's going to feel wrong for you not to track. Not because you need to track, not because you need to track in order to trust your body, not because you need to track in order to fuel your body, more just because you're so used to doing it at this point. It's common for you to feel like, oh my gosh, what if I stop? What's going to happen? Oh my gosh, right? Worst case scenarios start playing in your head. So we want to kind of slowly, especially if you're doing this on your own, transition away from it. Decrease those days is my number 2 best recommendation for that next step. So if you're typically tracking 5 to 7 days, shifting to tracking maybe 3 or 4 days. Trying to cut it down by 30 to 50%, and then getting used to that new baseline, and eventually kind of moving forward from there. Okay. My last recommendation in terms of how to stop tracking is to get used to flexibility, practice flexibility while you're tracking. So for instance, kind of look at what you've tracked the past couple days. Is your breakfast typically include a carbohydrate, a protein, and a fat? Okay, so practice flexibility with what those choices look like. Instead of choosing that bowl of oatmeal with peanut butter, maybe you're going to choose 2 slices of toast with an 2 eggs, right? So kind of practice flexibility within the food groups that you're already taking in, just to kind of move in a way that's away from this rigid eating pattern, if that makes sense, right? The reason why tracking is not helpful is because it makes us believe that fueling our body is dependent on putting these foods into the tracking app, and fueling it correctly is dependent on that. And that's not the case. We know how to fuel our body knows how to fuel itself. We just need to kind of give it that wiggle room to work. There's also always going to be a natural ebb and flow with our eating patterns. It's not normal for us to kind of eat rigidly every single day. Our body works off of an overall average. And when we allow and embrace that average, it allows us to kind of have fluctuating eating patterns that work with our day-to-day, work with our body's changing needs, and work with our changing preferences. And that's okay. And that's the way it should be. So we really want to get away from that rigidity. And in order to feel comfortable doing that, sometimes it can feel very hard to go from 0 to 100 in terms of, or I should say 100 in terms of tracking a lot and 0 tracking never. So we really want to practice flexibility in what we're used to doing to help transition us to a more comfortable place, and then slowly kind of giving up the tracking from there. those are my top 3 recommendations. I hope this was helpful. Sometimes I talk a little fast. So if you have any questions or clarifications about this, please do not hesitate to DM me. I'd be happy to chat about it more. Also, if you're struggling with how to stop tracking, you really feel like you've tried to stop before and it just hasn't been easy for you and you don't know what to do and you want a little guidance, this is a very common problem that I work with a lot of my clients to help them confidently fuel their active lifestyle while getting away from tracking apps and food rules and just food stress in general. So I'd love to help support you on this journey. So please do not hesitate to reach out if you want to chat about how to work together as well. I hope this was helpful. I'm going to try and do another live next week on a different topic, so I'll keep you updated.